I'll never forget the look on her face, triumphant, almost like she'd just served me a death sentence when she showed up in my yard right as the kids were cheering after a big cannonball. It was as if Karen Mitchell had been lurking, waiting for her cue, her eyes combing every inch of my grass, and I could practically hear the gavel dropping before she'd even opened her mouth. You want to know what real neighborhood power looks like? It's not in the rules, it's in the way someone can weaponize them. That day she called 911 and declared I was a danger to the community, reciting every word like she'd been practicing in the mirror for weeks. She thought she could crush anyone who challenged her, that her clipboard was a shield and the HOA bylaws were a sword. But there was one thing she never saw coming. Not every family in our neighborhood was touchable, and the price for trying was about to crash down a whole lot harder than any fine she'd ever written. From the street, you'd peg me as your average suburban dad, a beat-up Civic in the driveway, a tidy ranch house married for almost a decade, a 7-year-old son named Danny who never met a puddle he didn't love. I'm Michael Torres, 35, just another Maplewood Estates homeowner. That's what people saw. They didn't know I spent my days as a deputy director for the FBI, living 2 lives and keeping it that way for a reason. Karen Mitchell, meanwhile, ran the HOA like it was her personal kingdom, her violation list longer than a CVS receipt, her gaze like a security camera with a grudge. All this nonsense kicked off because my son made friends with Jake at school. Didn't even know at first that Jake was the governor's kid, until he announced it at lunch, grinning ear to ear. My daddy works in the biggest building in the whole city. Next thing you know, Jake's coming over for a play date, and Karen appears clipboard tape measure the whole power trip. Your grass is a ½ inch too tall, that's a $50 fine. And that picnic table? Not pre-approved. I just stared at her standing over a plastic Walmart table thinking, lady, get a grip. Karen, come on, it's a kid's table. She didn't budge. Rules are rules, Mr. Torres. 72 hours or the fines double. As she marched off to her new BMW, I thought there's no way this lady lives on a $200 HOA salary. At dinner, Danny looked up and asked, why was that lady so mean about our table? My wife Sarah just squeezed my hand and said, some folks think being in charge means being bossy. Don't worry about it, buddy. But honestly, I was worried. I'd barely seen my own kid in weeks thanks to a federal case that kept me chained to the office. So for Danny's belated birthday, I brought home a 12-foot inflatable pool. The look on his face, worth every penny. We set it up, and within 2 hours, Karen was on my porch waving a $500 violation. Pools require permits. 15 feet from the fence line. Remove it or face an extra $1,000 fine. I told her, it's not in the CC&Rs, Karen. Portable pools aren't even mentioned. Her grin sharpened. I just amended the regulations last week. Didn't you check the meeting minutes? Of course, there'd been no meeting. She was making it up as she went. That night, Sarah just shook her head. She can't do that, right? I watched Danny splashing in his new pool and said, apparently she thinks she can. And from there, things only got uglier. Karen went nuclear, emailed the whole neighborhood warning them my family was a bad influence and encouraging folks to shun us until our serious violations were handled. Mrs. Henderson, who used to bring Danny cookies, started crossing the street to avoid us. Even Mr. Patel stopped inviting Danny over. Only Jake kept coming, which seemed to make Karen even madder. That's when I started noticing things about Jake. He'd mention his dad's security guys, the big meetings, the government SUV that idled down the block. Then one afternoon, Jake flat out pointed at the black SUV and said, those are Daddy's protection guys. That's when the whole puzzle clicked. Karen's crusade peaked at an emergency HOA meeting, 35 families packed into the community center like it was a courtroom. Karen was ready for war. PowerPoint slides, aerial photos, red arrows pointing at every supposed infraction, unauthorized pool, tall grass, plastic table, public nuisance, you name it. She sounded like she was narrating a true crime documentary. Mr. Torres, you have refused to comply. The board is imposing $200 in fines. Suddenly my family, my kid was being stared at like we were criminals. Leaving that meeting, I caught Karen in the parking lot whispering on her phone, Mark, the plan is working perfectly. We'll force them to sell under market. The lot goes to your construction company. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules, this was about stealing homes. A development scam hiding behind HOA letterhead. The final straw came on a Saturday when Jake and a few friends were over. Sarah was grilling hot dogs, Danny was bragging about his cannonball form, and the kids were shrieking with laughter. Suddenly, Karen stormed into our backyard, her face beet red. "This is the final violation," she screamed. "You're running an unlicensed swimming facility. I'm calling 911." And she did right there in front of 4 kids, dialing the police to report me for child endangerment in my own yard. The kids froze. But Jake, cool as anything, quietly recorded the whole thing on his iPad and whispered, "Uncle Mike, I'm sending this to my daddy." That was the moment I decided to go on the offensive. I dug into Karen's records, her taxes, property filings, HOA finances. And the deeper I went, the uglier it got. She'd failed to report $47,000 in consulting income from her husband's company, Clear Tax Evasion. Mitchell Construction. Her husband's firm had bought 5 homes in our neighborhood, each one after families were fined to oblivion. A pattern of forced sales at below market rates, classic strong-arm real estate theft. Then, using county records, I found Karen's own massive pool, 3 feet into a public easement, no permits, just like her backyard deck extension. Her own property was a code violation gold mine. I called up an old contact, Charlie Rodriguez, a building inspector with the county. "Charlie, can you run a routine inspection sweep in Maplewood Estates?" He chuckled. "If you're asking, there's got to be a story." Meanwhile, Sarah, an accountant by trade, started sifting through HOA finances. She discovered $12,000 had been siphoned into Karen's pockets as consulting fees. Then Jake dropped the bomb. "Uncle Mike, my daddy, is Governor Richardson." I showed him the video. That evening, the governor himself called me no politics, just a dad. "Mike, I appreciate you looking out for my son. Let me know how I can help set things right." And suddenly, I had an ace in the hole. I announced a neighborhood reconciliation meeting, framed it as a chance to build a better community. Karen couldn't say no without looking petty. Behind the scenes, I coordinated with the county and the governor's office, scheduled inspections, prepared evidence, and got ready for the showdown. When the day came, the community center was packed. Karen was dressed for a coronation folder in hand, already savoring her win. She demanded to speak first, marched through 47 slides of our supposed violations, whipped up the crowd, and called for a vote to force us to sell. The tension was electric, neighbors shifting in their seats, my wife's hand shaking in mine. Then I stood up. "Before we vote, I'd like to introduce someone who wanted to see our community." Every eye turned as Governor Richardson walked in with Jake, just 2 regular guys, except you could hear the silence drop like a bomb. Karen tried to recover, stammering something about routine business. The governor just smiled and took a seat with my family. Right on cue, Charlie and his inspectors walked in, badges out. "Sorry to interrupt, folks. We're here to conduct some urgent county inspections. We'll start with the Mitchell residence." Karen lost it, panicked, furious, yelling that this was private business. Charlie didn't flinch. "Ma'am, this is a court-ordered inspection. Interference is a criminal offense." While the inspectors headed out, I fired up my laptop. "While we wait, let's review some HOA practices." Slide 1, forged signatures on Karen's election ballots. Slide 2, Sarah's analysis of $47,000 in improper fines and missing funds. Slide 3, a map of all the homes Mitchell Construction acquired, every single one after a family got bled dry by fines. Then Charlie returned, citation book in hand. "Mrs. Mitchell, your property violates multiple county codes. Unpermitted deck pool in a public easement, unlicensed electrical work. Fines total $8, $400. Mandatory repairs will cost $45,000. You could have heard a pin drop. Karen shrieked, called it a conspiracy, but nobody was buying it anymore. I dropped the final hammer. State law required any new rule changes to be approved by 60% of homeowners. Karen had made up every single new regulation. Every fine was illegal. The governor stood and said, "I recommend a full state investigation into this HOA and criminal charges if appropriate." The room exploded, neighbors furious, shouting out their own stories. Karen completely lost control, screaming threats until security led her out, still vowing revenge. I called for an immediate vote to remove her as president. 41 hands went up. Karen and her husband were out, forced to turn over all HOA records. Within 2 days, the county red-tagged their house, the IRS froze their accounts, and the state attorney general opened a fraud investigation. Mitchell Construction lost millions in contracts. 3 families sued for forced sales, and Karen and Mark sold their house at a huge loss, the same trap they set for others. Karen pled guilty to tax evasion, got probation and a fat fine, while Mark went to federal prison for conspiracy. All illegal fines were refunded with interest. New bylaws were put in place, 75% approval for any changes, no more kangaroo courts, and real financial transparency. Sarah became the new treasurer, and with the governor's blessing, our story helped pass state reforms for HOA abuse. Now our old violation pool hosts the community's kids every summer, no complaints, just laughter. We turned Karen's old enforcement office into a library. When a new family moved in, an interracial couple with a special needs daughter, Danny and Jake, had them over for a pool party the very first night, and 6 families brought food to welcome them. That's when I realized Karen never understood real power in a neighborhood comes from helping people feel like they belong, not from scaring them into silence. And yeah, sometimes I smile when I water my grass, exactly 3.2 inches tall, just because Danny likes measuring it, and remember how far we've come. When people stand up together, bullies lose their bite, and the neighborhood you build is worth more than any fine. I guess the best revenge is giving every kid the freedom to cannonball and every neighbor a reason to stay. So let me ask you, where do you stand when justice comes knocking on your street? Drop a comment below. Was Karen just enforcing order, or was this pure abuse of power? Let's talk about what real community means.